be doing West Virginia. So first I'll talk a little bit about the head coach, and then I'll talk some about the roster, and then I'll go through the schedule and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So head coach Neal Brown enters his sixth season as the head coach at West Virginia and his 10th season as a head coach. He was the head coach at Troy for 4 seasons before becoming the head coach at West Virginia. And there he had three 10-plus win seasons in a row that got him the job at West Virginia. And he hadn't been good at West Virginia at all before last season. Before last season, he had 5 wins in his first year at West Virginia, and then 6 in his second year, and 6 in his third year, and then 5 in his 4th year. And going into his 5th season, he was considered one of the most likely coaches to get fired after the season. But then he got them to 9 wins, so he was able to keep his job, and that was a good coaching job by him because West Virginia was expected to finish last or close to last in the Big 12 last year. And still, though, like I've said before, with coaches, it doesn't mean too much if they have one good season, because a lot of bad coaches have had one good season as a head coach. Now, I'm not saying that he is now still going to be a bad coach. Maybe he's got things figured out now at West Virginia, but it's kind of a wait and see thing until he does more. But I do think that West Virginia is going to have a pretty good team this year. They returned 70% of their production from last season. And recruiting with Neal Brown hasn't been that good, though. In 2022, West Virginia had the 35th ranked recruiting class, and then in 2023, the 49th ranked recruiting class, and then this year, 2024, they had the 46th ranked recruiting class. So his overall record as a head coach is 66-45, and his record at West Virginia is 31-29. So now, starting on the offensive side of the roster, they were pretty solid here overall last year, averaging 31.5 points per game, and that ranked 38th in the country. And they were the third best rushing team in the country last year, averaging 228.9 rushing yards per game. But they weren't a very good passing team, ranking 89th, only averaging 205.7 yards passing in a game. And at quarterback, Garrett Green comes back, who played and started 11 games last season at quarterback and had in that 2,406 passing yards and 16 touchdown passes. And his accuracy was awful. He only completed 52.5% of his passes. That needs to improve. That was way below average. And his yards per throw average, though, was good at 8.7. And overall, as a quarterback, he wasn't that good. And as a runner, though, he was very good. He had 772 rushing yards on only 120 carries and 13 rushing touchdowns, averaging 6.4 yards a run. And he had 3 games of over 100 rushing yards at last season. So at wide receiver, they've got nearly all of their top receivers back from last season, but they need to get a lot more production out of their wide receivers. None of them did a whole lot for them last season. Uh, Now they do have a good tight end coming back, Cole Taylor, one of the better tight ends in the Big 12 conference. He started 11 games and played in all 13 last season and had 444 on 35 catches and 4 touchdowns. averaging 12.7 a catch. And at running back, West Virginia is really good. They return two really good running backs. They've got Jaheim White, who had 842 on only 109 carries last season and four touchdowns, averaging a really impressive 7.7 yards a carry. And he had four games of over 100 rushing yards last season, including at 204 against Cincinnati. And they have C.J. Donaldson, who had 798 on 171 carries and 11 touchdowns, averaging 4.6 a carry. And he had three games of 100 plus rushing yards last season. And the offensive line for West Virginia is going to be really good. It was one of the best offensive lines in the country last season, and they only allowed 10 sacks all of last season. And they've got three full-time starters coming back on the offensive line, and they've got five players back that have started at least four games for them. And the full-time starters that they have coming back are left tackle Wyatt Millam, who didn't allow any sacks and only allowed eight pressures last season, and left guard Thomas Remick, who played in 11 games and also didn't allow any sacks, and center Brandon Yates, who didn't allow any sacks and played in every game last season. And on the defensive side, they're solid here. They were okay last year defensively, but not great, averaging allowing 25.6 points per game. Their defense at stopping the run was pretty good, ranking 46th, only allowing 143.4 rushing yards a game. But their secondary was bad, ranking 85th, giving up 237.4 yards passing a game. And this year, I think they'll be worse at stopping the run, but better at stopping the pass. So the defense might even be a little bit better overall, but probably pretty similar to last year's. So on the defensive line, they returned two of three starters. They've got Sean Martin, who last season had 28 total pressures and 27 tackles and a sack. And they've got Edward Vistarinen, who had last season 28 tackles and three sacks and four total pressures. And at linebacker, they're not great here overall, not real experienced. Now, they do have one starter coming back who was their best linebacker last season. He's good. Ben Cutter, he had last season 56 tackles and two sacks and a pass breakup. And then the secondary, I think, is going to be pretty good this year. So they returned two good safeties. They returned Anthony Wilson, one of the Big 12's best safeties last season, having 80 tackles and four pass breakups and an interception. And they returned Avery uh, Burks, who has in 24 games combined these last two seasons 114 tackles and six pass breakups and three interceptions. And they bring in two transfer corners, and they have a transfer safety coming in from a littler team at Jacksonville State. His name is Kikorie Tarnui. He was good from where he came from. He had last season there 53 tackles and four pass breakups and three interceptions and a sack. And then the transfer corners are Garnett Hollis from Northwestern, who had 49 tackles and three pass breakups and a fumble recovery and an interception last season. And then they bring in a transfer corner from a littler team at Duquesne. His name is Aiden Garnes. He had there last season 50 tackles and 10 pass breakups and two interceptions. And One of those was for a touchdown. And then special teams looks very solid. Both specialists return who did a decent job for them last season. So overall, a pretty good roster. And now moving on to the predictions, they start the year at home against Penn State, a big non-conference game. So I did a Penn State video yesterday. So if you watch that, you already know I think West Virginia is going to pull the upset. Penn State's quarterback that I call Disaster Aller did play really well in this game last year when these two teams played in the opener. He threw for over 300 yards, but after that, he played bad the rest of the season. And he also looked terrible in the spring game. So it's hard to have confidence that he's going to play well against them again this year when that's the only game he's played well in college. West Virginia, I think, can match up pretty well with Penn State at the line of scrimmage. Penn State's defensive line, I think, is better, but West Virginia's offensive line, I think, is better, and it evens out pretty much. And their offenses are similar. Both teams are going to be running teams, good running teams, and not great passing teams. And I do think Penn State is better, and it'll be really close. And like I said in the Penn State video, I would pick Penn State if it was on a neutral field, even. But West Virginia is a tough place to play, and I think they're going to be a good team. And Penn State, I think, is going to be down this year. Then they play Albany, which will be an easy win. And then they play on the road at Pittsburgh. Pitt is going to be horrible this year. I think they'll win this one pretty easily. Then they play Kansas at home. This, I think, will be a close one. Kansas, I think, is going to have a good team this year. West Virginia's play at the line of scrimmage, I think, is better than Kansas is. Kansas is the offense, I think, is more balanced than West Virginia's. They're going to be good at throwing it and running it. And this is, though, a bad matchup for Kansas's defense, I think, because their strength is in the secondary and their front seven's not very good. And I think they're going to have a really hard time stopping West Virginia's run game. I think West Virginia will score a lot in this game, and so will Kansas. I don't think West Virginia is going to be able to shut them down, but the game is at West Virginia, so I am going to pick West Virginia. Mm, So then they play on the road at Oklahoma State, a really good team in my opinion. So Oklahoma State's offense, I think, is going to be hard for anyone to stop. I don't think West Virginia is going to be able to stop them much. They're going to have a great offensive line, and they're going to be really good at running and throwing the football. West Virginia, I think, can take advantage of Oklahoma State's a weak defensive line with their run game, but Oklahoma State's linebackers are really good and they can help out with stopping the run. And I think this will be pretty high scoring. And I do, though, think that Oklahoma State will outscore them and win by like a touchdown. Then they play Iowa State at home. This is a tough one. Iowa State is going to be the second most experienced team in the country this year, and they're a team that plays tough usually, even when they're not very good. And I know they're not real talented, but if you looked at talent, West Virginia isn't real talented either, like with recruiting rankings. I do though think that West Virginia is better at the line of scrimmage, and I think that will make the difference, and they'll win this game. But I do think it's going to be close. Then Kansas State at home. Teams are pretty similar. Kansas State is going to be a great rushing team and not that good of a throwing team, in my opinion. And they're also a very physical team. They can match up West Virginia pretty well at the line of scrimmage, and their defense is very solid everywhere. And I do think Kansas State is a little bit better team, but I'm going to go with West Virginia to get the win because it is at West Virginia and it's close enough, in my opinion. to get them the win, having the home field advantage. So then they play on the road at Arizona, a team that's going to have a very explosive offense, and they're going to be a pretty balanced offense. Arizona, I think, is going to be a good running team, and they've got a solid offensive line. And of course, their quarterback is great, much better than West Virginia's Noah Fafita, and they've got that really good receiver McMillan that can make a big difference. That West Virginia doesn't have a receiver like that that can really make a big difference in the game. At least right now, it doesn't look like it. And Arizona, though, I do think is going to struggle to stop West Virginia's run game. Their front seven does have a few really good players, but not very many. The other players are, I think, probably average at best in their front seven. And I think that this will be a pretty high scoring game, but I'm going to go with Arizona to get this win. So I do think that this will be really close, though. And then on the road at Cincinnati, Cincinnati may score some in this game. They may get into the 20s, but their defense is going to be awful and has no hope of slowing down the West Virginia run game. I think they'll score a whole lot of points in this game, and West Virginia will maybe even run for 400 yards on them and score 40 something points probably, and it'll be a blowout. So then they play Baylor at home. Baylor will probably score a decent amount in this game. They'll probably score 20 something. But like with Cincinnati, their defense, I don't think, can slow down the West Virginia run game. And West Virginia's got much better play at the line of scrimmage than Baylor does. And I think uh, that's just going to be too much for Baylor. And West Virginia, I think, will win. Now, I don't really think this will be a blowout. I think this one could be pretty close. Baylor, I think, is a little better than Cincinnati is. And then Central Florida at home. So Central Florida is also going to be a really good rushing team. And their offense is more balanced than West Virginia's is. They're also going to be pretty good of a passing team. But West Virginia does have a much better offensive line than Central Florida does. And Central Florida and West Virginia's defenses are pretty similar. Uh, and Central Florida and West Virginia, I think, are pretty similar on the defensive line and at safety. And I'd give Central Florida an advantage at linebacker, and then West Virginia an advantage at the cornerback position. So I am going to take West Virginia because I do think they're a little bit better and they're playing at home, but I do think this one will be pretty close. So then they play to end the season Texas Tech on the road. So if you watch my Texas Tech video from a few weeks ago, you heard me say that I think that West Virginia is better than Texas Tech, but Texas Tech I think is a decent team that's going to get a win against a team that's better than them this year. So I'm picking that one to be against West Virginia, and I do think this will be close, though, and a very winnable game for West Virginia. So my final prediction for West Virginia is 9-3 overall and 6-3 in the conference. So this would keep them out of the Big 12 championship and college football playoff, but I do think West Virginia is a contender for the Big 12 title this year, and I could see them getting to 10-2, which would give them a great chance to make it there. But I could also see them losing a few other games and having a disappointing season. But that will be it with this video, and please subscribe and thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.